Welcome to the 10th and proudly first independently self-produced episode of the Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience. Listen in as we share our career stories, relive the moments that shaped us, and voice our opinions as loudly as we like about all manner of CX subjects. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about one woman's journey from graduate assistant to taking on the mantle of commercial analysis and customer value management at one of the world's leading airlines. Let me introduce you to today's inspiring guest. During her 27 years at British Airways, she held various commercial roles, including leading the Know Me programme, where she pioneered technology that supported making better data-led decisions about customers and their experience, and is now founder and director of her own limited company, Sentio B. Please welcome to the show CX sister Jo Boswell. Hi Jo.
Hi Claire, how are you?
I'm awesome. Welcome to the Women in CX podcast.
Thank you for having me. Really delighted to be here.
And welcome to all the listeners too. So Jo, you've had an absolutely fascinating career journey spanning 27 years with British Airways.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it ended up being quite that long. I certainly didn't intend to stay that long when I joined.
I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your career journey today. And also, we're going to be tackling the challenge of proving the value of customer experience, and especially one of the biggest challenges that we hear CXers talking about, particularly on LinkedIn, is proving that return on investment. Does that all sound good?
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's kick off then. If you could tell us a little bit about how you started out and what you learned about yourself in those early days at BA.
Yeah, I joined British Airways on a graduate training scheme. And actually my very first role was as a check-in agent, which was a great place to learn about the airline and to learn about customer service and some of the challenges around delivering great customer service. And in those days, you wouldn't believe the old-fashioned tech that you had to learn as a check-in agent, to check somebody in. So it's a really important lesson, actually, in kind of removing those points of friction, even for employees, to enable them to deliver great service. But then my second role on the grad program was a job that I called the Bob job. And that was a newly created role at the time as an assistant to the director of marketing and operations. And his name was Bob Ayling. He subsequently went on to become quite famous as CEO, but I was offered the Bob job. And there was no JD, and it was quite daunting because there was no one to learn from. And to a degree, everybody around me was a lot more senior. So it was quite difficult even to figure out who I could even ask, if I was uncertain about something. And really, I feel that actually that role was probably quite a defining point in my career, because I had to learn to be reasonably pushy. Because in order for the job to work for me, I needed to ensure that I was getting in to shadow Bob in some meetings and getting to see how he was running the business. But equally, I had to find ways that I could add value for him. And, I had to spend quite a bit of time, for instance, with his PA, really working through, what his diary looked like for the week and spotting those opportunities. Where I could step in and maybe, do some preparation, write some notes, brief him for a meeting, or even identifying forthcoming speeches that he had, and then going away and sort of researching and starting to draft those things for him. So it was a really interesting sort of early lesson in shaping something that to find a way to add value both to the business, but also to ensure that I was learning as well. But by the same token, because I was working alongside all of these really senior people who were a little bit suspicious of me because they knew I was his assistant and he was the big boss, So I had to kind of strike that delicate balance of helping him, but also ensuring that I earned the the trust of his direct reports as well. So it was kind of an interesting political situation.
Balancing act.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was it was a great learning experience. I got to see the great, well, subsequently at the time he was Sir Colin Marshall, was subsequently Lord Marshall. I got to see him at close quarters in action, and he was just a fantastic leader. He had such a human side to him. And that was really great to see. And I also had some great experiences. So I remember, I was in my mid-20s and I accompanied Bob on a business trip to the US. And because of the schedule and timing, we got to fly over on Concorde. Oh my goodness, can you imagine, So there was me trying to be super cool and acting like, it was an everyday occurrence for me to travel on Concorde. I was just so excited. And yet I was sitting next to the big boss, and trying to kind of keep it all in check. And the lovely thing is actually, and it shows his human side, is he went around the aircraft chatting to all of the crew and so on. And then when he came back to my seat, he said, I've arranged for you to sit in the flight deck for landing at JFK.
Wow.
Which was just lovely, because he did realise just how super exciting that was for me. And that was an experience I'll never forget.
Wow, that's awesome. You're the first person I've ever met that actually has been on a Concorde. So
it was a beautiful aircraft, Concorde. I was so sad that it had to retire.
So we're talking about 30 years ago, pretty much, in the early 90s. And as a young woman, I'm assuming that a lot of those executive roles were filled by guys. Were there many women at the top of that?
There were some women in senior roles at the time. So Val Gooding, who subsequently went on to become the chief executive of Bupa, she was actually in charge of cabin crew at the time. So there were some good role models, it was interesting, and it was great to learn from those people. And I think certainly at an early stage in my career, I felt, BA was had quite a diverse management team, and I really felt that women were supported, and you had every opportunity to learn and develop. But I still, there are times in my career when I realise that men sometimes react in a very different way to women than they do to men who are perhaps behaving in the same way. So an example of that was when I was in sales, and I was working for a male manager. There were 7 of us in the team, 4 women who were all very feisty and quite challenging of the manager, but in a good way, all wanting to kind of improve things and, find ways to make what we were doing better and succeed. And as a result, that manager nicknamed us the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse. And I think he thought we would take it as an insult, but we wore it as our badge of honor. We were so proud of the fact that he felt we were so challenging that we had to have that nickname. And those other 3 are actually still really good friends to this day. So I had an opportunity to be able to watch senior women and learn from them, but also learn an awful lot from some of my female colleagues that I've worked closely with over the years.
It's lovely to hear that you still ride with the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse now and again.
we still laugh about that anecdote. And also I can remember one time, I think when he was trying to encourage us all to hold our nerve and not give away too many deep discounts, and he used the phrase "keep your knees together." It's just so inappropriate. But yeah, it gave us quite a few things to laugh about.
That is hilarious. Just picking up on something that you said there about the behaviour of women being perceived differently because we are women. So, for example, women who are assertive getting labelled as bossy or aggressive, when if the same behaviour was coming out of a guy, there would not have been any kind of negative comment made
Mm,
about that. Or
yeah,
if men show emotion, it's praised because they're
yeah,
empathetic, whereas women are labelled as emotional. And
yes, yeah,
yeah, it's just really fascinating to kind of reflect on that point of gender, even in really inclusive companies,
yeah.
still occasionally surfacing itself as an issue in being treated differently, albeit not with negative intention or anything malicious, but it's still to this day, 30 years on, in many of the conversations I have with women, is a similar circumstance. But I love the fact that, you know, something that was said it to you in fun, the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse, you framed it as your own to
Totally.
signify your strength. That is really, really cool. So leading on from that story, can you tell us a little bit more about how you ended up getting into these really commercial and data orientated roles, but still put the customer at the heart of how you were driving such a hard edge within British
Yeah.
Airways?
Well, I think the commercial side came because my career progressed through a variety of different commercial roles, and you know, at an early stage, as I said, I was in, you know, I was in the sales team, and so I've always been, you know, very comfortable in those roles where, you know, figures are very much, you know, the kind of central piece of it. But by the same token, you know, I started my career in check-in. So, you know, customer service and the ability to, you know, really delight customers and resolve problems, you know, in a way that can turn a negative experience into a really great experience has been, you know, really important parts throughout my career. So, yeah, it's interesting, really. I don't think I ever had a particularly well thought out career plan. I was quite opportunistic with some of the roles. You know, I knew I had an idea of how I wanted my career to progress, but I was opportunistic with you know, certain things that came my way that might not even have been roles that existed, you know, the sort of 12 months beforehand, and I seized those, you know, to take the opportunity to kind of prove that I could take a project and, you know, carve it out and, you know, find the value. So I did that in a number of different commercial environments, and then I found myself, that would have been in, the early 2000s, leading the pricing activities for the UK market. And along with that, the team that did all of the commercial analytics for the UK market. And that expanded then to supporting the commercial the commercial decision making for the whole airline, including needing to forecast the revenue for, you know, the entire passenger revenue, £9 billion of turnover for the airline. And the irony was that actually, when I was at school, I thought I wasn't very good at maths.
No way.
And all of a sudden, I found myself managing a team of analysts, you know, like these, you know, super bright people, all, you know, really smart, you know, able to code and, you know, use Excel in ways that I could only dream of. But what I did realise is actually I've got a very analytical kind of mind. So, I sort of forged this name for myself, really, as being, you know, quite a numbers woman, and I would be reporting to the board and to the leadership team on the revenue outlook and so on. But I've always had at the same time a keen interest in customer experience and wanting to, you know, to make the experience better. And the opportunity came along after a few years when I'd been looking after customer data. So I'd sort of inherited the responsibility along with my commercial sort of analytics responsibilities. I was looking after customer data. And what I realized is that actually the airline was sitting on a gold mine that hadn't been looked after. It was like, one of our most important corporate assets had been neglected for quite a few years. And, the data was in a bit of a mess. The definitions weren't consistent. And so, the data didn't tie up from one system to another, which is, familiar problem that you tend to find, with CX projects. And I was just identifying kind of some little quick wins that we could do that, in using some of our operational data and service data, actually we could have smarter conversations between the account managers, the salespeople, and some of our corporate clients, for instance. So, identifying how good the punctuality had been for a certain corporate client, and identifying whether or not there were any major service issues. And that absolutely transformed the conversation from being one about just how many sectors they'd flown and what kind of revenue they were generating, to being a much more holistic conversation that was about the service levels that BA was delivering to that organization. And so I think after, I'd been bleating on for probably a whole year to my boss at the time, was the chief commercial officer, to say, we really need to be investing in doing something much more intelligent and smarter with our customer data. Eventually my bluff was called, and he said, right, off you go, set up a program and, see what you can do with this. So, coming full circle from that Bob job in the early days, once again, I found myself with that blank sheet of paper, and I needed to get the right resources, start to attract a team to come and work with me, to see how we could use our data in a way that could really create value both for our customers, but also ultimately add value to the business. And I can remember those early months. It was super tough because BA at the time had just acquired British Midland, the other major UK carrier, domestic carrier. And so there were, everybody, all the resources that I was trying to get hold of, they had all rushed off to work on that new integration project. And I was sort of, running around trying to find people who would be prepared to come and work with me and, help me deliver the Know Me program, as we called it. Eventually I found some brave people who were willing to come and work with me, take a chance on that initiative. I brought in a little bit of external help as well, and we just set about in the early days doing a bit of test and learn, really, and just creating some tangible proof points around, if we start to work with our data in smarter ways, demonstrating to the business the value that could have, and also the reaction that our customers would have to it.
Yeah, and I can only praise you for being able to balance that so well. I frequently talk about finding that sweet spot between doing things that are great for customers, and that's the genesis of it, using data to identify what those things are, but also demonstrating simultaneously the commercial benefit that can be driven through creating a better experience. I think you'll agree that it seems to be one of the biggest problems that the CX industry is facing. Like, I can't go even one day without seeing a post talking about how do I prove return on investment of CX? How do I get the board on board with, the ideas that I have? And I'm always replying, my advice to it. But I have to just bring up something that I read on your LinkedIn, which is a real rarity, I think, to be said of anyone in CX. And this was from the CFO at British Airways, who oversaw all the capital investments at BA. And he said about you, Jo was very impressive in the way she led the significant programme, including presenting a compelling vision for how BA could transform customer experience using data and technology, which was apparently one of the best board presentations he's ever seen. Bringing strong business cases, breaking the investment into bite-sized chunks, reporting back on tangible business benefits at each stage, adopting an excellent stakeholder engagement approach to ensure the leadership team were bought in and aware of progress, successfully navigating the politics of the organisation to deliver a truly cross-functional transformation programme that touched almost every part of the business. Like that, to me, is probably like the greatest thing that could ever be said about a CX leader, right? Working within an organisation, from particularly a commercial department, and being able to drive customer, employee and business value in a way that resonates with the C-suite because you're talking on their terms. It's brilliant. And for me, I think it's something that we have to really embrace as a development need for many of the professionals in our industry, because not many of them came out of commercial like we did, or very big commercial organizations, where if we didn't talk like that and we didn't create those cases, no one would have paid us the time of day.
Absolutely.
But especially where CX practice is evolving and growing, and in a lot of countries that will be listening today, they're facing that stakeholder engagement at a senior level as the biggest barrier to doing anything at all. So I said a lot then, but my question in response to that was, what is it about your model that you could share that enables you to have such incredibly powerful conversations that get stakeholder buy-in? What would your advice be to women in CX out there wanting to sharpen up their commercial thinking?
Well, I think it is really important, if you're embarking on a program that is likely to require, some significant investment. It's important to give confidence to your senior stakeholders or to the board by identifying what those quick wins could be. Now, at BA, I actually quite deliberately chose some commercial areas to demonstrate those quick wins. And, in terms of the difference that made actually to the end-to-end customer experience, it was probably negligible in terms of, if you like, improvement in inverted commas to customer experience, because we were looking at how we could use the data to personalize our marketing communications. And that was all around just making them more engaging, working out which destinations to talk to different customers about, whether to be talking about premium cabins or non-premium cabins, or holidays or just flights only, and so on. And we were able to demonstrate a huge uplift by tailoring in effect, the propositions that we were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you used the data to direct the offer, which ultimately will ensure a better experience, because you're having the right conversations with the right people at the right time, which gives them what they need and drives revenue. Win-win.
Absolutely. But by the same token, at the time, I could probably have pointed to a lot of points of friction in the end-to-end customer experience that we could have sorted out, but we deliberately chose not to start with that, because we wanted to create the revenue upside, and we were able to create some really stunning results. And it was the kind of technology that we had to implement in order to achieve that was a huge challenge, because in effect we were going from mass marketing emails, one size fits all, to a virtual one-for-one rendering of an email, and literally sort of choosing the 4 destinations to talk to, that customer about. It gave us the results that we needed. That provided us with much needed air cover. We did also choose a kind of in-journey, in-person experience to test as well. And that was starting with finding little moments of recognition in the customer sort of lifetime journey that could be celebrated face to face. So, for instance, if somebody achieved that next tier in the frequent flyer program, we would ask a member of cabin crew to go up to them, and just have a little conversation on board and sort of thank the customer and congratulate them on reaching that next tier. And the interesting thing with that is that we were able to observe a complete halo effect across the whole journey from that one little recognition point. And again, that was through the data. So that was monitoring, those customers where the message had been delivered versus customers of a similar ilk who hadn't received the message. And amazingly, we saw that just that little bit of recognition, whether or not they could even recall it, kind of provided this halo effect in terms of the net promoter score for that journey. So we had that, those two, one kind of really, really commercial and one with a sort of link to the commercial outcome, because we had done some work at BA to equate sort of points improvement in net promoter score to a monetary value, and that was accepted thinking that had sort of passed the test of the most rigorous finance directors at the time. So both of those things really helped, and all the way through, I would say to the board, here's my business case. This is how I'm going to invest the money for this next phase. This is what you'll get at the end of it, and these are the results I'll bring back to you. And I gave them the confidence, even though I knew that the program would be a multi-year program. They had the confidence to know that if 12 months down the line I wasn't delivering those results, they could stop it. And they weren't effectively committing to investing forever. 4 or 5 year program, but it was in effect, I'll come back to you with the results, what we've done, how we've invested the money, what that's delivered. And interestingly, it wasn't, I think it was about 18 months in when they started to challenge me on why we weren't doing the kind of improvement in customer experience elements,
That's great though, isn't it?
Which was the bit I'd always wanted to get to.
That's great though, isn't it? Because what you've demonstrated there is not asking for the permission to do that. You demonstrated so much value, it gave you credibility to the point where they started asking you for it. If you talk about influence, I think that's a really clear strength of yours, and it's shining through. So my final question is just, what advice would you give to other women in CX on their path to becoming more commercial or sharpening up that angle? What would you say they should be doing?
Yeah, that's a good thought, actually, because I think it is important to get yourself comfortable with the numbers and what those can do for the bottom line. So certainly when I work with clients today, one of the first questions that I will ask is, what metrics does this business run on? And what are the customer metrics that are going to add value to the bottom line? So whether, what's the value of one extra customer retained, or, what's the value of one additional product sold to an existing customer? And it's, it's sort of really, I think if you're leading a CX program, it's really important to think about what are the dials that you can shift with this program that are the metrics that your organization runs on. And every organization is slightly different, but you've got to really tune into what those metrics are and be comfortable. And if there isn't a very clear link between what you're doing and what those metrics are, then you will always struggle. So you've got to try and find a way of creating that link, I think. And I think it's about surrounding yourself with the right skills. If that's not your skill set, then go and find it and make sure that you've got an ally sitting alongside you. And certainly when I was running the Know Me program, I always wanted to have the finance team absolutely inside the tent, and understanding what we were doing, and kind of, making, even though they didn't report directly into me, I would kind of make them an inclusive part of the team, because the better they understood what we were trying to do, the better they were then able to support us and help us navigate our way through, the business case hurdles and so on, writing the post-investment appraisals. So, I always think it's really wise to get really close to your finance manager, and, they're not there to just challenge you and stop things. They're there for a reason. You've got to kind of tap into their mindset, and also help them understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point, enlisting the help of finance people if it isn't your forte. I know for me, that was a huge turning point. One of the biggest projects I have ever delivered in Sainsbury's days, I could say we had a £4 million return on investment. That was because I had someone in the team working with me who was absolutely bang on with generating the numbers. But as you said, I had to get really comfortable with the numbers and talking about the numbers, and change my language to be much more number centric than I naturally gravitate towards, because in CX we're all about emotion, but sometimes you have to interpret that right into the language that needs to be used for your audience. And also, just picking up on the point you said, the metrics are going to be different for every organization. If you're not all over trying to drive those metrics, no one's going to listen to you. And I think my only build to that would be, you should be questioning if you're doing something that isn't laddering up to
absolutely.
So yes, that's so awesome. It was so great to hear your story. I found it personally really inspiring to hear about so many successes that you can actually put a price tag on. It's great to see a woman in CX who is so credible and distinguished and proven, and has CFOs raving about her in a profile. I think what I really took from this conversation is you've always been about value, whether it was adding Bob job days, creating it in the roles where you use data to bring value to customers and to the business at the same time, or even now, as you've crafted this into a model that you're using with your clients today. It is really, really inspirational, and I think very forward thinking, and we need more of it in this industry. So my only ask for you, Jo, would be, how can you make an online course? Package up.
Well, you've given me an idea there. Yeah, maybe that's my little niche. The numbers girl.
Yeah, well, I'd love to build something like that with you for the women in CX community, perhaps a module that could help women to capture some of that magic that you've clearly got in spades, and see if we can do something. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure, great chat, and actually it was great just to have the opportunity to reflect a little bit on my career, because it's something we don't do very often, is it?
No, especially not the moments that shaped us. They're always to think about, and thank you for sharing them with me. Hope to see you all next week, and thanks so much, Jo. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Women in CX podcast with me, Clare Muscutt. If you enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, subscribe, or leave a review on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you want to know more, please join us at Women in CX Community and follow the Women in CX page on LinkedIn. Tune in again next week to hear Gavin James talking about making the difficult decision to put herself and her values first. See you all next week.